Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Glacier Conversations. This is the first one of the year, and we couldn't be starting any better. I am so excited to be welcoming the North Face athletes, Mike Foote and Jenn Lichter, and adventure photographer Stephen Gnam. They're with us tonight to share with us about their challenging and inspirational journey to see and photograph all the active glaciers in Glacier National Park. Jenn, Mike, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to let those three introduce themselves in a minute. They've put together a presentation, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you at least a few things about them that they might be too modest to mention. Mike Foote, who has a lot of this could also be an alumni meeting of the Glacier Guide Montana Rafts Company, where Mike spent some time, as did Jenn. Mike has held a world record. I think that in itself is amazing. The world record that he has held is for most vertical feet climbed and skied in a 24-hour period. He broke the Bighorn 100 course record in 2012, and he spends his spare time helping preserve Montana's open spaces as a board member of the Five Valleys Land Trust, which is one of the all-time great organizations in our state doing private land conservation through conservation easements. Stephen Gnam is an accomplished athlete in his own right, but he decided to make it a little harder by bringing a camera or two along while shooting pictures for the likes of National Geographic, Patagonia, the Glacier Conservancy. He's published a book called Crown of the Continent, The Wildest Rockies, which not only has striking images, but also a great essay by our friend Doug Chadwick. He started, as I understand it, a passion for photography at age 10 and has never looked back. As I mentioned, I had a chance to be with the dynamic and charismatic Jenn Lichter earlier, well, I guess last year now, at the Sportsman Ski House, where the North Face was showing the movie that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And she is a great storyteller and an incredible athlete. How incredible? She entered the Rut 50K, and she has a great story about this that I hope she'll tell about how that happened without ever having run that distance, and won. She won the Lake Sonoma Trail Marathon by over 20 minutes. And in her first road marathon, she finished in a time that would have qualified her for the 2020 Olympic trials. An incredible group, an incredible evening. Thanks again for joining us in this first Glacier Conversation of the year. As always, I'm joined by the best team in the business. Gracie Regala is with us tonight. She is going to run all things tech. And you can always find her at Gracie at glacier.org. And Amy Lucky is going to handle questions in the chat. She's always at Amy at glacier.org. We have very hard email profiles. We're going to really have some fun tonight. I really encourage you to ask questions. There'll be plenty of time for questions, so use the chat feature for that. And Amy's going to, as I said, come back and help us with that. Again, I want to thank the North Face for supporting these amazing athletes and the important work that we're going to talk about tonight. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and hand it back to Mike. And thanks again for putting together what I know is going to be a terrific evening.
Thanks, Doug. And hello, everybody. Really appreciate you all taking some time out of your evenings to be here tonight. I believe my mom from Ohio is watching. I think my wife and 3-year-old son upstairs are watching, even though he really wanted to watch Bluey instead. But yeah, I appreciate everybody being here. It's fun to talk about a really fun adventure that Stephen and Jenn and I had. And I am going to share my screen and get a little presentation going here. All right. Can I get some thumbs up if that's looking okay? Okay, thanks everybody. All right, so yeah, as Doug mentioned, our hope is to not necessarily just blow through this presentation, but give you a down and dirty of our adventure a couple years ago, and then open up to some great Q&A. And yeah, I'm sure we have a lot of really fun stories that might not make the first draft here as we come through the presentation, but happy to share so much from the our trip visiting many of the glaciers in the park a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'll just dive right in. Yeah, just real briefly, Doug was a very good hype man, so I don't know if I have a whole lot to add. My name's Mike Foote. I live actually in Missoula, Montana, for those of you who don't live in Montana. And yeah, been in Western Montana for 20 years. Fell in love with Glacier in 2006 when I became a guide at Glacier Guides, a Montana raft company, and was a backpacking guide. So spent a lot of time in the backcountry of the park, as well as guiding on the Middle Fork and the Middle Fork and the North Fork of the Flathead River. And yeah, it's been just a place I've returned to uh, ever since for many, many adventures. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Stephen, do you want to share a little bit about your connection with the park?
Yeah. My name's Stephen Gnam. I currently live in Central Washington, but I grew up in Whitefish, and I spent decades in Glacier, in and around the park. Kind of a quick funny story about meeting Mike Foote was I was hiking up the Pegan Pass Trail, and he was running down the trail with a friend, and I asked him where he's coming from, and he's like, "Oh, mini glacier." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." And this is probably 15 years ago, and I didn't run back then. And then I someone else proceeded to ask where they came from before that, and he had come from Logan Pass, and he was in the midst of a 50-mile run, which just blew my mind. And I just want to bring that up because Mike's ambition and endurance feats definitely were inspiring to me and to become a runner and a mountain athlete, and then also help cook up a trip as ambitious as this one. But yeah, that's all I'll add for now. Oh, Jen, you want to take it?
Yeah. I'm Jenn Lichter. I also live in Missoula, Montana. I lived up in the Flathead for since 2019 before and moved in Missoula in 2022. So I don't know how many that years that makes me in Montana, but still fairly fresh. But like Mike, I fell in love with Glacier, and it's kind of how I ended up in Montana in the first place, post graduation. I went to school in Toledo, Ohio, the university there. I was like on this like long road trip to Portland and stumbled across Montana because a friend from college had mentioned that I would love it there. And I was supposed to stay for like 2 days, ended up staying for 4. My mom was with me, so she had to catch a plane in Portland, so we had to like book it. And then I just like came straight back. I like packed my car and I was like, Portland, I thought it was gonna be my home, but Montana is gonna be my home now. So that's kind of how I ended up in the state. And yeah, I found my love of Glacier. Became a hiking guide in the same company, Glacier Guides, Montana Raft. And just fell in love with the park. And yeah, when Mike reached out to me about doing this, I was just like, of course. Like, so it was just like so perfect and so special. And yeah, I guess we can show you some pictures from it now.
And quick disclaimer, every photo in this presentation are all by Stephen Nan, except for this photo in the middle here of Stephen that I took with my iPhone a few years back during a scouting mission uh, for this trip to visit all the glaciers. Um, so yeah, moving on here. This is a map with a lot of blue dots on it or blue icons on it, highlighting where there's a lot of glaciers remaining in Glacier Park. As many of you know, there's around 25, 26 remaining glaciers in the park. What constitutes a glacier these days is shifting a bit. I think at this point it's gone from I think maybe like an acre in size to zero point 0.1 acres in size constitutes a glacier, or sorry, kilometers. So yeah, as we all know, there's a lot of recession happening uh, in the glaciers in the park, and with that, you know, Stephen and I years ago, gosh, I don't even know, maybe 2019, 2018, started to talk about this idea of glaciers, visiting all the glaciers of the park. And by design, they are all very, very, very remote within the park, uh, except for, I guess, Grinnell Glacier and maybe Sperry Glacier. But outside of that, they are all incredibly hard to access. So it was a fun idea, but a little intimidating for many years to pull off. And finally, we got some momentum one summer and really started to plan. And yeah, we had ambitions to visit 25, 26 glaciers over the course of a few weeks, but between family, life schedule, weather windows, all the things that come up in life, we knew that if we weren't able to visit every single glacier. We were just going to see how many we could in a couple week period. And, um, during that period of time, Jenn joined the North Face team. And as a fellow Montanan and somebody who guided in the park, she was a perfect fit for joining in on the adventure. So, again, this is just a screenshot of my Gaia map and highlighting just a lot of the routes that we were trying to figure out. A lot of these different lines you see are uh, potential routes for getting to a lot of the points we wanted to get to. So, as you can imagine, one of those ideas that you can only really half bake before you just have to go for it. And so, yeah, a couple of years ago in early fall, we made it to Many Glacier and started the trip. And it was an ambitious first day of the trip where Steve and Jenn and I decided we were going to run about 50 kilometers with 11,000 feet of climbing and visit a few glaciers along the way. Maybe the color of the water here is going to give this spot away and that big wall out in the background, but this is heading up to Sai Glacier. So as you can see, this little glacier up against the cliffs there. Where we were going to go collect a little water as well. What was really neat about Sai Glacier was uh, how much of it feels like this big rock glacier. So all the um, rocks are peeling off of I believe it's the east face of Mount Sai, the huge 4,500-foot wall right there above us, just peeling rocks off onto this. So it's really preserved the glacier, even though it looks so small. There's a huge mass of ice under the rocks. They're insulated by all that, all those rocks falling off. So yeah, here's a little photo. One of the ideas of this trip was to capture water from all the glaciers, directly from all the glaciers as many as we could throughout the trip. So yeah, anyways, yeah, on day one, we went to Sai Glacier, worked our way up to the top of Mount Sai and over to Sexton Glacier and then Pegan Glacier before making our way back to Many Glacier, which was a huge first day and definitely set the tone for kind of how hard of a trip this was going to be, um, which is a good segue into talking about just the difficulty. I mean, for everybody that spent time in Glacier, it's challenging enough on trail. And then, of course, once you go off trail and you're peak bagging or ridge running or going up just steep, third and fourth class slopes, yeah, it can be really, really laborious. And we found ourselves in terrain like this quite often. As I mentioned earlier, just the nature of the glaciers and how they've receded deep into these alpine cirques. We found ourselves just working ridge lines and then having to side hill down into these basins to get to the actual glacier itself. So a lot of going up and down in terrain like this. Jenn, do you have anything you would like to add regarding the difficulty of the terrain on this trip?
Lots of side healing. Oh my word. Um, there was like, I don't know, I feel like there was never really a direct way to get places. So I feel like it was always like navigating the safest for us, even though like even the safest was like sometimes like, oh, like you have to know what you're doing. And I was really grateful at some points where Steve and Mike were there because they were more experienced. And they would guide me through it. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I can see how this could be terrifying for some people. But yeah, it was just a lot of side hilling. ankles, man, you need to have strong ankles to be able to withstand that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was kind of always up, down, or side healing. There was really no like super direct path unless we happened to come across just like an already established trail, which we did a couple times and it felt like we were floating through those. It was really nice. But yeah, I don't know what to add to it, but it's pretty crazy to think back on it now. And it's just like, yeah, that was like pretty a pretty darn crazy feat of itself is having to go through that day after day after day. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The glaciers made you work hard for them. That's basically what I'm saying. They're like, we're pretty. You want to come see us? Well, you got to work for it.
Fully agree. Yeah, and this is a photo of, I believe, Cracker Peak and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen. And then Sai out in the background there. You can see the sun hitting the top of the peak there and the top of the big east uh, face going all the way back down to Cracker Lake and Sai Glacier where we were earlier that day. So another big part of this project, well, I'll take a step back. For us, it was, I think the three of us love moving through big landscapes and connecting to landscapes. We're all advocates for wild, open places. Stephen through his work in photography, Jenn and I through advocacy work as well. And so selfishly, we just all wanted to have a big old adventure in Glacier. And once that was set, we then were trying to think of the best way to tell that story and the best way to make it as impactful as it could be. And as I mentioned, collecting water that we could then perhaps use down the line for an exhibit was one way of doing it. Another way of showcasing it was something that Stephen was well aware of, which was the repeat photography project that the USGS has been doing in Glacier National Park for a very long time. And so we decided we were going to carry around physical prints of the glaciers from 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 110 years ago, and then recreate and work really hard to find the exact spot those photos were taken, if possible, and recreate those photos. So yeah, this is a photo Jenn is holding of Jackson Glacier. For those who know, it's one of the glaciers that's most visible from the Going to the Sun Road. So Jackson Glacier overlook on the east side of Logan Pass there. And it's one of those things that when you're far away, it's just this beautiful sight. And then getting all the way in there is so much work. And then, of course, bringing these photos with us and getting right into these exact spots where we can, like I said, recreate those photos and seeing the stark contrast is really powerful and visceral. And again, just being able to be there and then share those images back to you all, to a broader audience, was something we really wanted to do. So here's a few photos of the Jackson Glacier. So yeah, again, 1913. And then 2021, 2022. Yeah. So again, you can see the large recession of Jackson there, and Stephen and Jenn were directing me and probably laughing a bit, trying to get me to pose exactly like this person in this photo from the Alden survey of 1913. So yeah, then we worked our way up the polished slabs up to the toe of the glacier. And yeah, so when you're looking at Jackson Glacier all the way from Logan or from the Going to the Sun Road, this is it.
Mike, we were laughing because you looked so small. You look like a little ant.
I should have included a lot of the photos Stephen took this day of just the geology, and you can just see kind of the water rushing over and just like really neat, for lack of a better word, designs in the rock. Yeah, and it's interesting to see, that it was only been uncovered in the last decade or so, especially right here at the toe. Just above Jackson Glacier, you get to a little saddle, and actually you're looking at one of the largest, especially kind of south-facing glaciers in the park, Harrison Glacier. So again, yeah, just we weren't able due to some fifth class Chaucy down climbing. We decided not to get to the toe of this glacier. So this is an example of a glacier that we decided that we would rather get a repeat photo of and not have to spend an entire extra day trying to collect some water. So I have it on my to-do list to go up the Harrison Creek drainage and get to the toe of the glacier that way, so I can collect some water on the in the empty Harrison Glacier bottle that I'm staring at right now. So yeah, another really dramatic um, contrast between the photo I'm holding in my hands to the the one photo, the one that Stephen took that day. There we go. Yeah. All right. So I might turn it over to Jenn a little bit here in a second. And Stephen, feel free to add a little bit here if you'd like. But every adventure comes with a little bit of adversity. And we were only a few days into this trip, but by the time this photo was taken, we had my wife who brought a resupply as our route crossed the Going to the Sun Road. Her wheel fell off of our car, quite literally on the Going to the Sun Road. We forgot to pack our stove when we got the resupply. Jenn had a bear spray incident where she was holding onto her bear spray and it just exploded a little bit, which obviously caused a whole lot of not fun for us in that moment. And then she started to deal with some knee pain, which actually caused her to not be able to go visit Jackson Glacier and Harrison Glacier with Stephen and I that day. And we came back to camp that evening and found her looking like this, which was a bit of a downer, but these are the types of things that happen on these big trips. And Jenn, if you want to share anything about this, yeah, feel free.
Yeah, so this picture looks way more dramatic than it actually was because I was acting way more dramatic than I actually was. But more of the story is like my knee just had like a bit of an overuse. Like one of the tendons was like really, really angry from just like overuse, and it hurt when I bent. And so I was trying to restrict the bending to see if like the nerve would come down, which is you can't see in this picture, but behind the reason there's like that orange strap and like the white strap is because I put a stick behind my knee so that I wouldn't bend it. So it looks very dramatic, but the injury was, I caught it early, so it didn't turn out into like a full-blown like end of the trip type of injury. But I did have to have a sit down talk with Mike and Steven that night. And they looked at me and they're like, "Hey Jen, how you doing?" And then they're like, "You should probably like just take the next day off." And so they helped me hiked out, and I met my partner Nick, who was bringing in our resupply because we were about to do like gosh, I think the next like was it 5 days without seeing anyone, something like that. So he was bringing like a huge resupply for us. And I ended up going into town in Whitefish, and seeing my PT, and she's like, "Yeah, it's just overuse. I think the nerve is just like really inflamed." So she did some of her magic work on it. She did like cupping and all that, and had me do some exercises, and then I ended up joining them the next day in like the evening. So I hiked in from
The loop.
what huh? Yeah, the loop.
The
Yeah.
loop.
Up
Yeah.
to what's that chalet called?
Granite Park. Yeah.
Granite Park Chalet. Yeah. So but yeah, it's not fun. I was really annoyed because, I'm a runner. I run a lot of miles. I've, did hiking for a long time and years, and that was my first like hiking injury. So I was like super confused, but I knew that I was putting my body through something totally different and terrain and way harder than anything it done before. So yeah, this is why that picture's there. I was just trying to keep my knee from getting more aggravated. So
and spoiler alert, if anybody's seen the film, they know that Jen rallied after that few days off and finished the whole trip with us, which was great. Um, I love this photo, not because I mean I like it because it showcases some of the terrain we had to move through on this trip, but mostly because it shows us trying to get to Grinnell Glacier, which is the easiest glacier in Glacier National Park to get to, and we absolutely took the hardest route to get there because we were bopping along on the west side of the divide and needed to get over to Grinnell Glacier. And of course, it snowed that day, so we're doing a lot of this type of work to get down into the basin after visiting the Salamander Glacier, which hangs on the cliffs above, and then coming down into Grinnell. So yeah, many of you have probably been to this spot. If you look really closely and you know what you're looking for, you can see some people down at the in the kind of like green grassy section, if you will, at the foot of the lake there. So yeah, this is us taking the not so common route to Grinnell Glacier. Yeah, this is another photo of that. Yeah, so again, really stark contrast. This photo was taken from 1923, so almost 100 years exactly since that photo was taken to this moment. Okay, moving on. One of the glaciers that admittedly we hadn't really discussed visiting was Boulder Glacier, which is near Boulder Pass in the kind of northwest section of the park, near Hole in the Wall and Boulder Pass, that zone. If anybody's spent time there, they know it's one of the most spectacular places in the entire park. Um, and frankly, we didn't and just so, yeah, I'm speeding up quite a bit here. This is much later in our trip. I'm happy to, in the Q&A, discuss some of the other things as we traversed the Livingston Range, as we went through snowstorms, rainstorms, uh, challenging getting to places like Vulture Glacier and Thunderbird Glacier. But for the sake of time, I wanted to focus on Boulder Glacier here, which essentially is not a glacier anymore at all. But it was one of the ones that we saw the most contrast in between these old photos to today. So there's the remains of the glacier. You can see just some remaining ice up against the cliff there. Um, of all the photos that we took, this is one of the ones that Stephen took and kind of choreographed for us. This is one of the most stark. So 4 people at the base of this big glacier, Boulder Glacier, and then yeah, the 4 of us that day. So we've got Stephen, Jen, myself, and then also Jen's partner Nick, who, as we had mentioned, had come in to help with a resupply. And so yeah, pretty that was probably one of the areas that felt the most stark to us. Um, this is a pretty photo of Jen, I believe, under the Cheney Glacier. Am I correct on that, Stephen? Yeah. Yeah, it was we visited I think 17 glaciers over the course of the trip, so there's definitely many we had to give up on due to logistics, weather, some of this adversity we talked about. But getting to every glacier was never really the goal. It was about connecting with the place and having these intimate moments with the glaciers and being in these places that are really challenging to get to and that we know aren't visited that often, and then sharing those photos and experiences upon our return was really the goal. So yeah, these moments were really cool. I think Cheney Glacier and I think North Swift Current Glacier were the two. And again, I'll kind of looking at Stevens on the screen here to see if I'm right on that. But those were the 2 places where it was really neat. We were able to kind of work our way into and underneath the glacier a little bit and capture some audio of the water, flowing through the ice. And yeah, it's just for those who have ever spent time inside a glacier, it's a really unique experience for many of the senses. So, Stephen, do you want to speak a little bit to what it's like documenting that, or do you want to save that for Q&A stuff later?
Yeah, we can save it if folks
Okay.
have questions about it.
Okay. Jen, I'd love for you to speak about this. One of the things that you talked about when we discuss this trip were how excited you were to maybe do a little art and capture the glaciers through um, yeah, your watercolor and things like that.
Yeah, so I guess nobody knows this, but so I actually graduated with an art degree. So I love art, and a lot of the art that I've done throughout my life has been of landscapes. That's like one of my favorite things to do. And most recently, in the past like year since I moved to Montana, a lot of my art has been inspired by Glacier National Park. And so I did bring some art supplies to do some mountains and stuff, but I'm not gonna lie, it was hard to like find the time because with these days it wasn't like we had time to just like hang out when we were down in the evenings. It's like we were there for like gosh 10, 14, 15 hours, like from like 5 a.m. all the way to like 10 p.m. done like with food and stuff. So obviously it got darker before that, but so it was kind of hard to find the time, and also like weather played a big role. They were, this was the time of year where the winter was coming. Glacier was getting ready to nestle down. So like Mike mentioned, there was a lot of really, really cold days, really rainy, cold days. So it would be hard to do some art, but we got a chance to do this near the end of the trip. And so um, we like laid all our clothes to dry, and because I think at that point we'd gone like 3 or 4 days in the rain, and so it was like wet everything. And so it was really nice to like find a patch of sun one day and then just like relax and like take in everything. And so that's kind of what I did. That was like my version of like taking in everything. I know Mike went up, I think he like hiked up somewhere and had some like meditation of his own. And so it was really cool. And then Steve went and played with his camera. So I feel like in this day, it was like everyone did their like little individual like peacemaking and taking like this kind of crazy, beautiful place in, which it is hard, like to be in a place like that and really take it in. Even now, like looking back on the film, looking down at the pictures, it's just like, oh man, like, yeah, we were in there. And even to this day, it's like, yeah, that's like otherworldly. So yeah, I feel like with the art, it was like, how do I capture something and like bring it with me? So yeah.
That's awesome. And for those who don't know, that's Thunderbird Glacier that she um, that's her art for that, and you can obviously see it in the background. Um, Couple more pretty photos here. This is Sexton Glacier, not too far off of Sai Pass. Little sheep there posing for Steven. Yeah, and of course we were off trail in Glacier National Park and for a couple of weeks, and we encountered a lot of wildlife, and it was wonderful. I think over the course of that time, I think I counted seeing 12 bears. I think I was more of a bear magnet than everybody else. I would like whenever I would leave the group for a few minutes, I would see a bear. And so I think Steven and Jen saw 6 bears over the trip, and I saw about a dozen, and really cool interactions, and yeah, really wonderful to um, yeah, see the wildlife of the park, which is so special. And also as we're taking these like high routes and high trails through the mountains to drop into these wild basins, oftentimes we'd be following goat and sheep and bear tracks, especially on the snowier days. We would be able to see all the tracks, and it um I think I might have said it in the film, but it's like that's when you were going the right direction, and it was kind of cool to have them as our guides throughout the whole trip. And yeah, anyways, just a little photo of us watching a big big bruin there, just digging in the rocks. That's it. We obviously skipped over a lot, and happy to answer any questions or tell any more stories. And I know that we're always short on time to share everything. So yeah, happy to open it up. And if Jen or Steven or Doug, if you have anything else to share, um, yeah, please do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to put that together. And Amy, I'm noticing that we do have a bunch of questions in the chat, which is super fun. And feel free to add yet more. We do have about a half an hour, almost half an hour with these guys. We will get you out of here on time after our hour. But Amy, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, sounds good. And thanks for sharing all the images. For those of you who have not seen the film, Gracie put a link in the chat. It's I think it's about 17 or 18 minutes long, and it's fantastic. So really encourage you to go back and watch it if you haven't. There seems to be a common theme, and you touched on it a little bit at the end, Mike, with the bears. But any close encounters, I think about the huckleberries when y'all looked up and saw Mama Grizz doing the same thing you guys were doing. But just any really memorable Grizz encounters, or did they behave themselves? And what about other wildlife? Did you see anything else fantastic that maybe you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, I can speak to the bears. Yes, they behaved themselves. We behaved ourselves, but we definitely had encounters. I mean, shortly after that Huckleberry photo or part of the video, we had, noticed a bear in that Huckleberry patch, so we were gonna move on. And so, being in proximity to a bear, we had our bear spray out, and we're just moving down the trail as a group, and making ourselves known. And Jenn's bear spray with the safety still on, deployed onto Steven's back. And so I lucked out, but yeah, it was very unfortunate. And it was just a quick little burst, but definitely a bit disorienting. And obviously we had to kind of move on anyways because we were near the bear, and she didn't care at all. She and her cub were just doing their thing. They were in Huckleberry heaven. It was one of the best patches I'd ever seen. And they didn't care about us at all. But anyways, that was one very, very memorable moment. And then another was I was out ahead, trying to find my way. We were side hilling all day again, north in the northern part of the Livingston Range. And I was trying to find my way down into a basin. And as I was going over a convex rollover, I was aware that my line of sight suddenly was quite short. So I gave out a good hey bear. And right as I did, Bear and I were probably, I don't know, maybe 10 meters apart. Noticed each other for the first time, and then both sprinted away from each other with our tails between our legs, for quite a ways. And then he kind of worked his way around us and we gave each other big space, and he was a really neat bear to watch for a little bit. Stephen got a couple photos, and but yeah, and the rest were much more trivial encounters. And Stephen or Jenn, do you have any more anything else from other animals? Nothing's coming to mind for me right now.
I mean, we didn't see it, but my partner Nick, when he was hiking in from was it Kintla? Yeah. When he
Yep.
was resupplying us over at in the hole in the wall campground, um, he saw a bobcat, or was it a sphinx? One of those two. One of
Lynx.
those, yeah. Was it?
Oh, sorry. Did you mean lynx?
Lynx. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was he saw it and they had a moment and he got a video of it actually. So we weren't there to see that, but we were very jealous. And he said that it was like the craziest experience. Like he like just disappeared out of thin air once they like noticed each other. He's like they just moved so fast. So it's like they'll they'll put themselves out there if they want to be seen, but they can like disappear just as fast. Um, but besides that, not that I can. It would have been cool to see a Wolverine, but we didn't see that. Um, but no, we just saw bears, honestly. Um, yeah, I think that bighorn sheep that you got in the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to apologize. I told you two that we would definitely see a Wolverine, and we didn't even see a track, which was surprising because we were in some of the best Wolverine habitat in the lower 48 for a couple weeks, and yeah, we even had fresh snow and everything, but yeah, there's no Wolverines, just grizzly bears doing their last minute feeding before hibernation.
That's just because you promised the Wolverine that it didn't show up, right? They are elusive. Really cool. What about how much of your time did you spend running versus hiking? Were you mostly running just kind of at the beginning and then things got you got too high up or snowy or was there like other days that you would mostly run?
We only ran one day when we got really, really cold. It was like a really rainy day. And we were all really cold. And so while I remember while like Mike and Steven were setting up camp, they're like, Jen, just go sprint. And so I remember like just sprinting back and forth on this like little section of like this flat that we found, this flat area that we found. And then Mike went next. I don't know if Steve went next. I just went straight into the tent. I was so cold. And then some running pictures um, were taken for like just North Face, you know, with like our gear, like because that gear was coming out the following year. But I don't remember really running that much. I don't think this was about that. It wasn't like a we're
The
gonna
last
train out here.
the last day, Jen's hiking pace is Mike and I's running pace. So she was hiking in front of us for almost 20 miles, and we were running behind her.
Yeah,
You
Jen
kept
would
her
I
moving.
remember
remember
that day.
we were running.
I remember
Anytime we
that
were on
day
a
now.
flat or descending trail, we were running a fair bit.
I remember.
But I
Okay, I
don't think
remember that.
but our running Jen's faster than Steven and I when it comes to running, so she probably just doesn't remember it as well.
I remember it now, and I remember the reason we were doing it is because we were trying to meet Nick for our resupply.
Hmm, yeah,
Um,
we
and
ran
he
that.
was gonna about to get dark, and he
Yeah,
didn't have like a tent or anything. And we still had like what 10, 12 miles to go.
yeah.
And so we just like didn't want him waiting out in the wilderness by himself. And so I think that's where we like started to book it is so that we could reach him and make him all safe. I think that's what I think I remember that now. Maybe I just blocked it out of my head. So I was like, yeah.
It kind of feels like we need to have a follow-up conversation with Nick, or we should have had him on because he might be able to tell some stories about you three leaving
Uh,
him out out there without a tent.
it's so funny.
Since you brought up gear, Jen, it was kind of cool in the movie to see your different gear, and I had a question about what's your go-to jacket in that sort of situation where you're going to come up against like different elements. Um, what do you guys wear?
So I brought three different options. I brought like a puffy, for just like it's not raining, it's not snowing, but it's like really chilly. And then I brought a windbreaker. North Face had a really, 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 really light windbreaker. I don't know if they have it anymore. Um, just for like some of those windy like summits. You know how summits can be, it can be like totally different up there than down at the bottom. And then I brought a rain jacket. So I would alternate between the two. Like sometimes I'll have like my puffy with the rain jacket or like my puffy with the windbreaker, depending on like just weather conditions. Um, but I mean, we're biased. We think North Face makes the best uh puffies and rain jackets and windbreakers. But yeah, that's kind of what we were. Or at
One
least I were, yeah.
one note on the gear that I kind of find interesting is because we had all these, historic 100-year-old black and white photos, and a lot of the places were hard to get to. You had to imagine they didn't have all our like lightweight technical, mostly synthetic layers. And anyway, it was just kind of a marvel to be like we're holding these like artifacts of history, and you're thinking like these people they're probably carrying like 100 pounds of equipment to just get up here, old black and white photo or camera gear. Um, so anyways, I mean, the gear is obviously super important for being able to move fast and light as that terrain kind of dictates, but it's not the only way. Obviously, people have been moving through that landscape, using, way different kinds of materials. So it does, I mean, we're very lucky to be able to do it in this style because of the equipment um, now, but it did make me think of just like, yeah, wearing like thick wool or like waxed cotton, jackets or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most fascinating things about looking at old photos of Glacier is just what people are wearing and how great they look sometimes, right? Like they're all dressed up and they're way out in the middle of nowhere. So that's a really interesting point. Let's see. We've got lots more. Speaking of running light, we had a question about what photographic equipment you were using, Stephen, to keep things light.
Yeah, I just had one camera. It was a Sony A7S III, I believe, so a mirrorless camera and one lens. And then Mike and Jen both had GoPros, I
Yep.
believe. So yeah, I mean it was yeah, as light as possible. And again, the idea was to do the trip safely and not, you know, not be bogged down by equipment. And it wasn't the primary focus was to be safe in the mountains and visit all these places. And yeah, any footage we could get on the go is just a bonus.
He was
So
also such a wizard with that camera. The way he moved through that mountain, he was like, I always told you, I think I remember telling you even on the trip, he's like, you're like a little mountain goat. Like Steve Nam is a little mountain goat. Yeah, you were crazy how you moved through that terrain with that all that gear.
I think that for those of us who don't do what you guys do, I think you're all little mountain goats. So that's what I would say. Let's see. Here's one for each of you. Do you have a favorite moment from the adventure that stuck out when you think back? Something that was just, I don't know, really profound or really interesting.
I'll start. I've thought about this a lot, and honestly, it was just beginning it. You have an idea and you let it simmer for perhaps years, and you don't act on it, and then maybe you act on it for a couple of years, and it doesn't come to fruition because an injury or life gets in the way, and then finally the stars align. I mean, I think from the moment I thought about this to us stepping on the trail for the first day of this trip must have been 6 years. And so, because it was probably a year or two of thinking about it before I brought it up to Steven, a couple of years of us scheming on it. And anyways, it's just being able to have the privilege, if you will, and the health and the time and the resources to go on a big adventure. I mean, it's like, that first step, it's like, all right, this is happening. We're doing it. And what will be will be. But uh, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming everybody on this call, every chance they get to be in the park in a really special time of year to go to the place they love the most, wherever it is in the park or just the park in general, it's really special. And yeah, that's the answer for me.
I had one that I thought was like really cool. Is we were what was it, Helen Lake over kind of by the Kennedy and whatever almost Waterton area. And we were like bear calling as we're like transcending this terrain and we heard like a mom and two cubs like well we heard the cub first and he was like like wailing like it felt like a child and we were like where is that coming from? It felt like we were hearing just like this baby cry and then all of a sudden you just see like this cliff face and you see the mom just like I'm not kidding sprint up this cliff face and the two cubs are like following and I don't know if they got spooked by like maybe there was like a boar chasing the cubs. I don't know what was going on, but I thought it was like the craziest experience to like see the bears move through this terrain. Like you think of bears of being like really sloppy, really heavy, whatever, but just seeing this mama and these baby cubs like run up this cliff face was like I thought that was like really, really crazy and special. to see that happening in real time. Um, and also just like the way they communicated. So that was really special for me.
This is kind of generic, but it was really the whole trip and kind of echoing a little of what Mike's saying. Maybe it's getting a little older, having a kid, but just any minute I can spend in the park and in the mountains and do something like that, um, just feels amazing just to have the health and the resources, ability to do that, but also mountains are not easy or safe to travel in. So just everything from weather and terrain, like you can plan all you want, and I think we're as prepared as we can be. But as day by day, you kind of know you could get shut down by weather or lots of things. So I think yeah, we go into these trips a lot with like an open itinerary with like, okay, this is what we plan to do, but we know the mountains might give us something else or the wildlife. Like we might not be able to go through this basin because there's too many bears or whatever. So just the fact that we, I guess, pulled off what we did was kind of amazing. And yeah, every day was really beautiful.
Wow, thank you all for sharing that. I'm going to throw it back over to Doug just to mix things up a little bit. We have a few more questions to get back to, but we wouldn't want to miss a speed round.
Oh, you're muted, Doug. Nope. I think you're muted, Doug. There we go.
There we are.
Yeah,
Okay.
there we go.
It wouldn't be a Glacier Conversation or a Glacier Book Club without a speed round. So we're going to go directly to our friend Mike Foote. And Mike, I'm going to take you back to your growing up in Ohio with this one. The category is Ohio sports mascots. Very simple. Which of these two, among many choices I might add, is your favorite? The Akron Zips, Zippy the Zip, or the Toledo Mud Hens mascot Madonna?
This is incredible. I'm gonna go with Madonna.
Madonna. Okay, very good. That's and there are lots of others to choose from. Not the least of which, Jenn, is your alma mater, the University of Toledo. Now I'm going to take you back to your days as a guide. Preferred establishment for a post-float recreational beverage: Stonefly or Packers Roost?
Ooh, Packers Roost.
Okay, there you go. All right, Jenn, I'm going to you. Don't be nervous. Very easy. No wrong answers. It's breakfast time in Missoula, Market on Front, or Golden Yoke Griddle.
Market on front.
That's the easy answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Main,
All
okay,
right.
so yeah, that
All
is.
right. So, taking you to your guiding days, you need a hamburger. You're going to hamburger. You're going to Eddie's or Frida's?
Eddie's.
Eddie's. Okay. All right. We've been new owners, so we're gonna have to try them out again. All right, Stephen. Special Kashmir, Washington edition. Am I more likely to find you climbing or hiking Pachaston Pinnacles or biking Devil's Gulch?
Running Devil's Gulch.
Running Devil's Gulch. Okay. Ooh, that's pretty good. All right. And last but not least, I love Stephen Colbert's go-to question, what's the best sandwich? But because this is a yes or no, this or that deal, I'll go with the classic yes or no, Stephen. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Only if it's living between two slices of bread.
Okay, well, there you go. So, Amy, with that bit of hilarity, thank you for letting us know you a little bit and have a little bit of fun. I think the North Face has been very generous to provide us with a pair of shoes to give away and also a bag.
That's correct. The North Face has been very generous, and we have a base camp large duffel bag, and the winner of that is Sarah Burns. And then we have a pair of running shoes, men's running shoes from the North Face, and the winner of that is David Green. So if you two, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. It's pretty easy. easy, amy@glacier.org, or you can send it to info@glacier.org. And let me know your address, and we will get that information to the North Face. And yeah, please, Mike and Jen and Stephen, thank the North Face for being such awesome partners in this. And I have maybe just a couple more questions if you guys are up for it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just in the film, there's one scene that shows the team hiking in the dark with headlamps. What was the situation for that event?
We did that often. We were constantly behind schedule. We had a way too ambitious route, which was one of the issues of the whole trip, was just trying to keep up with how far we wanted to get to, and the daylight was receding. And so many mornings and many evenings we would be in the dark for an hour or so. Yeah. Yeah, we just didn't capture it all on camera. Just that was kind of any given day of the trip, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm just looking through to make sure that I don't miss any. Lisa K just asked, what was your daily mileage?
It varied per day. It varied per day. Some days would be on our feet for like 14 hours and only get like 10 miles in. Other days, like when we started that first day, we did 30 miles and we were what, I don't know how many, 12 hours. So it really just varied based on the terrain, how hard the glacier that we had to go off route to go see, how tedious that was. The weather played a huge thing. Sometimes it was like snowing, ice. We had to deal with that. So that would slow us down. So every day was just very different. So, but I feel like uh total, for the trip, if anyone's really curious, we did about 145 miles. And I missed some days, but about like 44,000 feet over total. So there are some fun statistics, not to the T, but somewhere in between there.
Wow, it's hard to imagine. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Doug, I'm going to throw it back over to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. This is such a privilege to be able to be in the presence of these incredible athletes who are so connected to our park and who have shared with us this wilderness experience. That's one of the things that we do here at the Conservancy. Our job is to protect the wilderness, wildlife, and wonder that makes Glacier such a special place to be. And telling that story, telling the repeat photography story, and having this next generation of people who are the people who are going to have to carry this legacy on is so very important. So thank you for that. Thank you for being in the park and being present and being with us tonight. And we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to tell our board on Friday that we were able, thanks to private philanthropy, to give just over $4.5 million in support to the park to protect the park's wilderness. And we can't do it without you. If you're so inclined, glacier.org is the place to learn more and to contribute. And again, Mike and Jen and Stephen, thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you in the park here soon. Thanks again. Good night.